Networks.
The first thing I think that we can all agree upon, whatever issues you might hold most dear to you, whatever solutions you think are key to the country, we all agree that there has to be a political revolution. And that the majority of the American people feel that something has gone wrong in this country. And they want deep, deep change. Our economic system is not working. Our planet is dying. We have to address racism in this country, which has not been mentioned that much. And unless we have a political revolution, there is no way that we can do that. And so I want to make the point in three general areas that Bernie Sanders will be the nominee of the party, and he will win the general election. And I believe that if he is the nominee, he will win the general election quite easily.
This is a good morning, everybody. That's Jonathan Tassini. That was Jonathan Tassini testifying for Bernie Sanders, and that was back in October, I believe. Yeah, October 6th of 2015. And forgive me for the rough start. I made an echo. I make an echo all the time. You know that. Good morning, everybody. We've got a lot of people with us. That was Jonathan Tassini in a video, but we are very lucky to have him with us today in the virtual studio here in the newsroom. And we're going to talk with him in just 1 second after I give you the kind of rundown of who this guy is. Wrote a book. But first, I got to say hello to everybody in the audience today. Yesterday, we had quite an intense day, and there's been a lot of things that have gone on for a lot of people, both personally and on the web and with the Nevada caucus and all sorts of things. And so, good morning. Glad to have you all with me here today. Bad Wolf and Ski Vermont and Alice and Think It Through and Brian and SJ Videos. Hi. And Jesse, thank you for being here this morning. And Lakeisha. Lakeisha, I got your video or your note about the delegates, and I have not had a chance to look into it, but thank you for sending me that information. Zox Ovox, J Vintage 1970s, Thor. Hey, everybody. Yale Freighter. Okay, so we've got a great group today. We've got John Spalding in with us. And John Spalding is a volunteer who actually got us connected with Jonathan Tassini. We have a lot of Johns here today. We've got Scott Glindez in with us, and he is going to talk to us about the politics, what's going on. Scott wrote an article for RSN. Actually, there's 2 articles that I pulled, Scott, from RSN. But here's what's going to happen, guys. I'm going to let those 3 have the conversation while I try to be an actual production engineer and let the conversation roll. We're going to take your questions for Jonathan Tassini, talk about whatever you guys want to talk about. We'll be running the lower third, so let's have a good conversation. But first, who is this guy who wrote a book? Jonathan Bernard Tassini, born in 1956, is a strategist, organizer, activist, commentator, writer, primarily focusing his energies on the topics of work, labor, and the economy. In June 11, 2009, basically the guy ran for government, and he ran against the establishment, Hillary Clinton, right? And now he's working for Bernie Sanders. He's working for us. He works for the people. And he wrote a book, The Essential Bernie Sanders and His Vision for America. And we're going to talk to John today as soon as I put him in a shot. Let's do that right now. Jonathan Tassini, welcome, sir. So good to have you.
It's an honor and a privilege to be here. You guys have done such important work for the political revolution, so thank you for having me.
Oh man, that means so much. Thank you. It's nice to hear it from. I guess I'm good. It's nice to hear it from what I would consider the real journalists, the real muckrakers, the real individuals out there writing the truth about what's going on and helping to dismiss the establishment lies. But thank you for being here, sir. Really appreciate it. Um, so
Great.
tell me, we're gonna get into the rest of the conversation, but what what made you choose Bernie Sanders? Why do you feel the burn? I just want to ask that question right off the bat.
Well, I think it's pretty easy, and I have to say, had Bernie Sanders not jumped into the race, I would not really be involved in this presidential race at all. Not that it's not important, but I'd be doing things like working on labor issues, which is most of what I do in my other life, and campaigns like the raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour and a whole lot of other things. But Bernie is, the real deal, and I think we all know that. And I've known Bernie for a fair amount of time, mostly using my sort of life in the labor movement. I was president of the Writers Union for a number of years, and in that capacity, I got to meet Bernie in big groups. I would go to Washington. I'm based in New York City, and because Bernie is in the Northeast region for our union, I'm a member of the United Auto Workers, a proud member of the UAW. We would go to Washington a lot and lobby in issues, and we'd come to Bernie, or he'd come to visit us and have a breakfast. And not surprisingly, he was always with us. And when I got to know him a little bit better several years ago, and we'll talk a little about that, I interviewed him for Playboy magazine. I, really got even closer to understanding who he was. And as I write in the book, in the introduction, I've never met a politician in my entire adult life, and I've met lots of them, who is as authentic and real as Bernie.
That's that statement right there seems to be what everybody says. Even the people not voting for Bernie Sanders say that.
Yeah, and even, you could go down the whole list. Let's just take one example. Joe Biden not too long ago said Bernie is about as authentic and real and has been on the front lines about inequality for many, many, many years, and he owns the issue. And I think, one of the things that I can communicate to people who have not gotten a chance to sit with him one-on-one is he's the exact same person that you see speaking to people in rallies of 20,000 people as he would across the table from you.
Yeah.
There's not any. Can I use foul words on this?
Absolutely, you can say whatever the hell you want.
I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to run afoul. So there's no bullshit with Bernie,
No.
and he kind of, he's just who he is. And that's one of the comforting things, because we're so used to politicians, including people who I know, who I consider friends of mine, who I consider, fairly decent people. Mm-hmm. All of them have a level of bullshit and a little bit manufactured slogans. Bernie doesn't have any of that. And I think that the last thing I'll say about that is I think that should give comfort to voters, not just the people who are obviously on board already, but all those people who we're trying to attract to the movement. That should give comfort to people, saying, when we actually elect this guy, he is going to be the same guy. He's not going to lie to us now just to get elected. He's going to be the same guy he is today as he will be in the White House.
I absolutely agree with you 100%. And I want to go into the campaign trail and just kind of where you see things after Nevada. But I want to ask you this. It seems to me, based on when you look at exit polls, when you look at any of the polls, right, they all say that, I won't say they all say, I'm not going to generalize like establishment media. Many of the polls establishment media are referencing say the things you're saying, that Bernie Sanders is honest. Bernie Sanders is integral. He's the same guy. Doesn't matter where he is. There was an article that came out today that says, look, I traveled with the Bernie Sanders press for 3 days. In that 3 days, we stayed in $100 hotel rooms. We ate at, cheap places. Even the celebrities that he has, the authenticity is there. Nobody argues the authenticity. But a lot of people are starting to play off this. Does that make him presidential? There was a ridiculous thing I saw where they said, they found Hillary Clinton and Jeb Bush to be more presidential, Jeb who just dropped out, than Bernie Sanders. What is this term, and why would why would people disconnect between the authentic human being and what it means to be presidential? That's,
Well,
you know,
I think that's a little bit just reflecting the stupidity of the media, the traditional media, and the way in which they just constantly reflect the things that they're used to saying. And one person, one media outlet says, and they just regurgitate the same crap over and over again. And so it becomes this notion of presidential. To me, it's kind of ludicrous, actually, because some of it has to do, you may remember that a lot of what people often try to judge presidents with about is, would you want to have a beer with the guy, right? You know, that kind of quote unquote authentic person. So take the example of George W. Bush, who people said, well, I'd like to have a beer with that guy back in the day. And here's a guy who, among other things, launched an illegal, immoral war that cost the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. That doesn't seem to me to be presidential. That seems to me just stupid
right.
and foolish and not presidential. You don't lead a country, or you don't necessarily choose a leader by judging whether that person is someone you want to drink a beer with. Now, on the question of whether someone's presidential, I think you just look at their experience and their judgment. And
Right.
on that, I think Bernie wins hands down.
Well, I would agree, and I think the concept of presidential is one of those ambiguous terms that they use to misinform the public. And what the hell does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. I mean, if we're really going to look at that, then look at, like you said, base it on actions. What has Bernie done action-wise in the last 30 years? What has Hillary done action-wise in the last 30 years? We've seen her bounce all over the place in terms of the political spectrum, right? We've seen Bernie pretty much stay true to what he is that entire time. But John Spalding, I want to get into this with you. I'd like you guys to talk about the campaign trail. Talk about Nevada real quick and what you think, because Nate Silver just put out an interesting article basically saying that Nevada was a win. Everybody's starting to realize that Nevada was a win for Bernie Sanders as well. And it showed weakness with the Hillary camp in the Latino vote, as well as some other things. And now with this information about Harry Reid, and basically the only reason Hillary was able to claim those 6 casinos was because they flooded them with culinary union workers. What do you guys think about all that?
Go ahead, John.
This is the first that I've heard that when I got into the room this morning, so I need to go and do my research on that. It doesn't sound shocking to me as far as the tactic. We know that they are going to throw the kitchen sink at us, and so we need to I think we need to be better at anticipating some of that stuff and really kind of ramping up the ground game. And I don't know how to help out with that other than volunteering, phone banking, and knocking on doors. But I welcome any other ideas. You were out there, Jonathan. You said that you were in some of the rural areas. How did that go for you? How were you received, and how was Bernie's message received?
Well, quite well. I want to answer that excellent question. Go back just to set the scene a little bit about what we should feel like coming out of Nevada. And I think that team in Nevada, and I mean both the staff people who came in and opened up offices when Bernie was 35 points down, and he was still 25 points down actually as of 5 weeks ago. But that team was unbelievable. And I met so many of them, a lot of women, young women who were field organizers, but just the tons of volunteers in the way we've seen all over the country. And when you think about it, you go back to Iowa where Bernie was, whatever, 30, 40, 50 points down, and he won, in my opinion, the popular vote. And it was essentially a tie when it came to the delegate allocation. Then we go to New Hampshire where he was then something, again, 30, 35 points down a year ago. And he crushed in New Hampshire. And the same thing happened in Nevada. You come into a state, and really the message out of that is that Hillary Clinton hung on by, just grabbing on, and they were in such close to a situation of meltdown and panic, because had she lost Nevada, then I think that there was a good chance we would roar into South Carolina and win South Carolina and then win many, many states in Super Tuesday. Now, that could still happen. And just on the practical math, and it's 51-51 on the regular delegates elected, the ones elected by the people, not the elite superdelegates. And I just wrote a piece about that in the New York Daily News about the threat that the elite unelected superdelegates will overturn the will of the people. But right now it's a virtual tie in terms of delegates who are elected. Now on the ground, it was just, I think I'm probably going to say something that many of the wonderful volunteers who are listening to the program, the thousands of people I've seen, or I've met hundreds of them in many states as I've traveled, they were just incredible. I mean, they were packed in these regional offices. I started out, I've been in Nevada, actually this was my third trip there. This trip started in Vegas, and then I went north about 250 miles to Ely, Nevada, and did work there with precinct captains, and then went across to Reno. The incredible energy, and particularly of young people who were the field staff, who were working with the volunteers, was really amazing. And I met people who had been in politics for the first time. I met this 18-year-old kid named Chris. I call him a kid because I was already outed what my birth year was. So to me, 18 is a kid. And he got into Bernie through Reddit. And he was a precinct captain, 18 years old, and he was a precinct captain. So that was just reflective of the incredible energy, and it is the reason I think that we came so close to winning the popular vote and really came out of Nevada with, pretty close delegate count. There was probably only a difference of 2 or 3 delegates.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good. It's good to have people like you and other people that I've been involved with at Bernie 2016 TV that kind of reel me back from the ledge. I take things a little bit too seriously when I see things in the news about Hillary ramping stuff up. So it's good to have and be surrounded with optimists and people that are really in this fight. So you're in your book, and then in a couple reviews of it, I saw that you had an interview with him that was in Playboy, and I know you've had a couple other interviews with him. So you can speak to that interview directly, or just give us a little snippet on a cool interview or a cool moment when talking with Bernie that stands out for you.
Yeah, so that was really the moment when I got to know Bernie quite well. Those of you who know, the Playboy interview is kind of world renowned in this sense. It's probably the only place where a subject can talk for a long time, meaning an interview that goes on for 15, 20,000 words, and it's a Q&A format, so the interviewer, me or anybody else, doesn't just put in analysis and sort of divert their ideas or twist them. And world leaders like Fidel Castro and Jimmy Carter have done the Playboy interview. Those of you who remember, are old enough to remember, you could Google this. The famous "I lust in my heart" quote came from Jimmy Carter's interview with Playboy. So anyway, it's to sort of set the context of this interview. And what I wanted to do was, and I approached Michael Briggs, who was his campaign communications director, but Michael was also his Senate communications director. Wonderful guy, got to be good friends. So I approached him about 3.5 years ago and said, we got to get Bernie to that audience. And the way Playboy defines that audience is it's state college, people who go to state colleges. Now that's not a demeaning thing. It's just they're not going to Ivy League private schools. It's a different audience. And so that was really important to me. And I guess to just jump to your point in your question, what stood out was what I say in the introduction to the book. This book, first of all, it's really 95% Bernie's words. I wanted to create an organizing handbook for people. So it's very short chapters on the issues. But in the beginning, I talk about a moment where I walked outside of Bernie's Burlington office after I'd spent a bunch of time with him, and there's a plaza there. Just down the street is the original Ben and Jerry's. Anybody who knows Burlington will recognize that place. And I just stood there for a moment, and that one word that I sort of started out with in this interview just stuck very clearly to me, which is authenticity. And I was just in the presence of someone who was just the most authentic politician I had met and had the privilege of spending a lot of time with. And here's how authentic he is. Everybody knows that Bernie is no nonsense. Well, so I came into his office the first time we sat down, and like a good, writer, I had a whole bunch of questions ready to go, and I put the sort of questions down, and Bernie sits down, and before I even opened my mouth, he said, "Well, just a moment," and he pulled out a whole bunch of policies and papers and information and put them down. So I want to talk about this, about inequality in the banks, and so he sees control over the interview. It was about, I kind of smiled to myself, but it was really so much him, of just diving in and being hyper focused on, this is what I want to tell the American people, and this is what I want to get across. And it's the same kind of person that I'm sure most of you have experienced when you listen to him speak at big rallies.
Yeah, yeah. And if you can sit down and have a conversation with Killer Mike, and you can sit down and have a conversation with anyone, and get right to the issues, that's what's driving this campaign, is his authenticity. And I think the more that we can highlight that, the better. So that's cool.
And here's a funny anecdote which came back to me after the New Hampshire primary. In that interview was probably one of the first times that the chatter about him running for president began. This is now, 3 years ago. And I asked him, and I was pushing him. This was after Occupy Wall Street. I basically said to him, look, this is your moment. Why don't you run for president? And part of that came in the interview, and it started this little discussion, and it sort of spread a little. But his answer to that was, I'm 99% sure I'm not going to run. And at the end of the New Hampshire primary, when we won, Michael Briggs, who I mentioned, the communications director, walked up, and we hugged each other, and he whispered in my ear, 99% sure I'm not going to run. You remember that quote too. We had a good laugh about that. So
That is hilarious.
yeah, that was pretty hilarious. We kind of like to kid Bernie about that.
Hey, Scott, you're up. Anything? Any questions?
Yeah, on that line, when I asked him in February, he said that he was thinking about running, but he had to make sure that there was enough people willing to run with him, that he wouldn't damage the progressive movement by running. It was always not all about him. It was about the movement, and whether he would benefit or damage it. And like one of the things you said about the non-slogans, I don't know if a lot of people realize, it was the people for Bernie that actually started the hashtag Feel the Burn. It wasn't from the campaign. It was outside the campaign that hashtag started.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's pretty awesome, guys. I think that's pretty awesome. There's a couple comments here I would like to ask, if you don't mind. We'll get right here. Does Mr. Tassini know what Bernie's campaign is going to do in order to garner more votes in South Carolina? That's from YouTube. Brom SLI1 would like to know. Brom, as we call him. What do you think?
Well, I think they're doing what they've been doing for several months, which is they're out there in every community. They've opened up offices in the major centers. I've traveled to South Carolina twice. I have not been there in the last couple of months or so. I was there when the campaign was relatively early on the ground. And I suspect, look, the truth is that the only challenge that Bernie faces, since we answered the question already, can he raise enough money? We know the answer to that is yes. The only other challenge that he faces is the question of the calendar, meaning do we have enough time to build the support? Because we've already seen in 3 states, when people hear his message, he does very, very well. I just don't know, as a practical matter, that we have enough time between, say, today and the 27th to win that state. But I think we're going to do a hell of a lot better than anybody ever expected, say, 2-3 months ago. And I think we're going to surprise people. So to answer, I think, hopefully the question directly, it means going community by community. They've got people on the ground, certainly a lot of Bernie surrogates who are African-American supporters. Nina Turner from Ohio, Cornel West, they're going to be on the ground reaching out to the African-American community, which is very important in the primary. And I hearken back to when I was in South Carolina. I can't remember, it was September, October, and I was in a small meeting with Cornell West and about a dozen African American political leaders and community leaders. And basically, Cornell's message was, we've been asleep for all these years, meaning we've just accepted this idea that somehow the Clintons are good for the African American community. And we simply have to wake people up to the fact that here's a man, Bernie Sanders, who's much, much stronger on the issues and much, much better for not just the African American community, but all workers.
Right.
And I think that's what they've been working on day after day to try to advance. And I don't think South Carolina is any different from any other state. What we have to do, we have to make the phone calls, we have to knock on doors, we have to have people out there doing, rallies, all that ground organizing work.
Absolutely, absolutely. The I can't. So none of us are qualified. None of us in this room are qualified to answer this question. So I'm going to ask it of the audience, and I'm hoping we get an answer. And that is, hello, black folks in the audience, black Americans. What is it? Because all of the things that me as a white folk thinks are going to work. Look at Hillary Clinton in the 90s. Look at Bernie Sanders' civil rights record. Look at the fact that Hillary was with the Goldwater campaign. Look at the fact that she's helped create the private prison industry with hubby Bill. None of those things seem to be swaying. That there really seems to be that strong African American support for Hillary. Is it just because they're piped into establishment media?
Well, let me just jump in and say two things.
Okay, yeah.
One is, I think we've made enormous amount of progress already.
Agreed.
And I think in some respects, it's the same thing Bernie has confronted with Latino communities, African American communities, and white working class, all communities. People didn't know who he was.
Right.
And over time, this is what I mentioned about the calendar. It takes time for people to find out who this guy from Vermont is, who in progressive circles people knew him very well, but he wasn't well known to the American public. And so, as I said, I think several times, my question was, what happens? Do we have enough time in the calendar? But the second point, I think it's often generational. That if you walk down, like where I live in New York City, in Harlem, on 125th Street, what you'll find is that older African American voters have some recognition of the Clintons. I don't think it's necessarily based on reality, meaning they don't talk about welfare reform, the fact that Bill Clinton was this hard on crime guy who ended up, because of those policies, ending up having the highest incarceration rates in the entire world, disproportionately affecting African Americans. So, but there is a certain segment of the older African American community that has this loyalty, if you want to use that word, to the Clintons. But among young voters, young African Americans, they were kids. They were babies when Bill Clinton was president. They have no real connection to Hillary Clinton. And so they're judging, I think like all younger people, they're judging Bernie based on, like, what is this guy saying to me about free tuition, tuition-free college and free health care and all the issues that somebody in their 20s, a millennial, really cares about.
That's excellent point. Sadly, what it really breaks down to in this country is young versus old in terms of thinking, not necessarily in terms of age, but age is a predominant factor there. That we're breaking it down by these demographics in terms of race. It's unfortunate, but there are numbers there to correlate. And I think you're right. I think it's just about where they're getting their information or what their version of the truth has been that's been fed to them is. It's just this whole election seems to be about a war of information, And
it's not so much their love of Hillary; it's the love of Bill. There was the saying that he was the first black president, and everything. And the same thing happened in L.A. the first time Antonio Villagrosa ran. He ran against James Hahn, and all the African American community loved his father, but that was the big reason that they voted for him. As soon as he fired Benjamin Parks, that was the end for him with the African American community. But it's this connection to Bill Clinton, not a connection to Hillary Clinton. So it can be It can be severed, I think.
Interesting. Great discussion. I'm gonna don't John Spalding. I didn't mean to take over there. I was just
Oh,
looking
no,
at some
no,
of
no,
these
no.
questions, and the next question in here, guys, I'm just gonna ask it anyway, is about foreign policy, and it says, can you? This is from my unself. Can you ask Mr. Tassini, please, about Bernie's foreign policy and why he isn't attacking Clinton on her disastrous policies as Secretary of State, Libya, Syria, etc., causing destabilization in the area? Why? Good question.
First of all, people have got to stop calling you Mr. Tassini. This is you guys listening out there. Only my bill collectors, as I say, call me that. Anyway, so I guess I would answer this in two ways. And this, whether you like this or not, Bernie doesn't like to attack. It's just not his style. And some people think that that's a good thing, and some people think it's not a good thing. And I'm not sure I want to dive into that debate. But he does, I think, in two ways, try to contrast himself on foreign policy. And he regularly brings up the fact that he voted against the Iraq War, and Hillary Clinton voted for the Iraq War and supported George Bush, Dick Cheney, and Donald Rumsfeld. And the thing I always say when I'm on TV doing these debates, I say, is there any Democrat out there who trusted George Bush, Dick Cheney, and Donald Rumsfeld? And most Democrats would nod and say, well, hell no. And I think to me, that's the central reason that Hillary Clinton's foreign policy, quote unquote, experience is complete and utter nonsense. Because when she actually had a vote, that was the most consequential foreign policy decision of the last 2 decades, in my view. And I think I'm reflecting Bernie's position on that. And then Bernie then says one of the outcomes of the war, which he predicted, if you go back and look at his speech on the House floor, he was then in the House of Representatives, his speech against the Iraq War, all of the things he said came to pass, including the creation of ISIS. I mean, he didn't use the word ISIS because no one knew what ISIS was then. It didn't exist. But he did say that there would be a vacuum created when you depose Saddam Hussein. And did anybody have a plan for that? And nobody did. And so today we're confronting ISIS. And the big difference, at least on that foreign policy issue, which I think is fundamental, is Bernie has made the point numerous times that the United States should not be the military police of the world, and that particularly the Muslim countries have to confront ISIS. And Hillary Clinton, though, is going back on her hawkish approach, willing to go to war and put people in harm's way at the drop of a hat, and she is calling for a no-fly zone and all sorts of other crazy things, which I think would lead to more escalation. So I think those are fundamental differences. And let me add one other thing, although it's not direct to the questioners asking on the other issues. One of the most amazing things to me, which somehow has not gotten a lot of attention, even on our side, is the way in which Bernie has twice in public debates pointed out the history of the United States overthrowing democratically elected governments. And he did so publicly. I've never seen a candidate of any party, but certainly a national candidate for the presidency, a Democratic national candidate, point out that we overthrew a democratically elected government in Iran, which essentially led to the rise of the Shah, which then led to the Islamic Revolution and put us in the position of our relationships with Iran that we have today, that we undercut the government of Chile, and a CIA-led coup overthrew Salvador Allende. And he went down a list. And I thought that was incredible and extraordinary for a national candidate to do that and admit that, because it also signifies someone who can understand, like in a moment, 30 and 40 years of history and draw it together. And that then says to me that that's the quality of the person who's going to understand in the Oval Office, with history echoing in his ears, what to do when these things come up again.
Hey, Jonathan, when was that?
The first time he did it was I'm trying to remember, and I think in the second debate, and then in one of the town hall forums that CNN did. And I don't honestly, I just don't remember which one because they all sort of now meld into one. But I think in the second debate, which would have been the one not in Iowa, but the next one, I think
So,
you could look it
okay.
up.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. No, that's cool.
And I wrote about it on my blog workinglife.org in one of my posts. I just didn't. I'm sorry, I don't remember which one it was.
That's all right. So from foreign policy, there's a couple other questions in here now getting to some economic policy here. And so one is from SS Porter. He said, what do you think would be a better way to measure the economic strength of America's middle class rather than using GDP?
Well, that's a fantastic question. I and lots of others, I've written about economics and labor for 20 plus years, and I and others have pointed out, and your questioner is asking a fantastic question, that using the measure of gross domestic product is a really bad way of going about it. And part of it is because what gross domestic product is essentially we're making a bunch of stuff. The economy is humming along, or making a bunch of stuff. And actually, there's an even more interesting argument, which is it even good for the planet and for us to just be involved in this sort of growth? That should we be growing like this with the consequences to the planet? But I don't want to delve into that per se. But I think that the real way you measure the how people are doing is, can they make a decent living? Can they pay their bills and have a little bit of money left over to save? And I think that's a very practical way of doing that and looking at people's real lives.
Yeah, and I think you could figure out a system where you could take those metrics and just analyze it and do some annual reports
And,
on where people are.
and that is actually analyzed. When we look at the growth of wages and people's incomes, what's the average income, and all that data shows that it's been flat. And it always
Yeah,
is astonishing to me that these talking heads who are on TV talking about, oh, well, there seems to be a recovery. Then 3 months later they say, oops, well, not really. And then 3 months later they say, oh, look, there's a little blip. And then 3 months later they say, oh, no, it's going down. Well, this isn't rocket science. If people in an economy where 70% of the economy is based on consumer spending, again, not necessarily to me a good thing, but it is what it is, in an economy when people don't have money, when they're deeply in debt, when wages are flat, and you've got an economy based on that is powered 70% of consumer spending, it's not rocket science to understand that we have a very weak, anemic, and not robust economic picture going back, for a number of years. It's not like a quarterly analysis. You can look at it over the last 5 and 10 and 15 years and come to that conclusion.
yeah, and then you see the charts that show workplace productivity, how our productivity is skyrocketing, but our wages are stagnant, and
That's
it's
right.
been going like that for 40 years. It's ridiculous. So
And
there's a
productivity, actually, just on that point, because you brought
yeah
productivity,
yeah
very
yeah
good point. If the minimum wage, let's just step back. Traditionally, in economics, when productivity went up, and particularly when unions were strong, that was supposed to then be reflected in wages. So that when we had high productivity, in theory, your wages should have gone up. If productivity matched, if the minimum wage was what productivity has been in the last 30 years, the minimum wage should be between $19 and $20 an hour. So when we actually campaign for $15 a federal minimum wage, we're only suggesting that minimum wage go somewhat closer to what it should have been after 30 years if people weren't being robbed of their sweat and their effort. That it should be closer to $20 an hour if actual people had gotten the fruits of their labor.
Yeah, that's what I've had a lot of conversations like that with my friends a lot of my friends lean conservative and things like that, and so they say things to me like $15 to make a sandwich? Are you kidding me? And I said, really, it's a question of valuing your worth. And so what we're saying is, as a country, those folks that do that type of work need to get that just to live. What does that mean? That means that you have the power to demand more. You go and say, this is the minimum wage. I am going to go do this. You can find it should go up as you have skills, experience, different knowledge, skills, and abilities to do your job.
That's right.
So it's really about all of us putting a larger value on what we're worth and saying, hey, we're not going to continue to let these organizations and these Wall Street companies and people using speculation and things like that to just line the pockets and take control of the game. So there's another cool question in here. There's some good comments. Your message is very well received. Ray Merrigan said it's the mass media um, and people that don't have good internet access. They are only fed what they're given. Um, there's Mr. Unself has a question that says, how do we spread the truth and make sure that it sticks over the disinformation and lies coming from corporate media? And so I'm going to have you answer that, but I want to tell everyone out there that I saw Jonathan on CNN, and he was being lambasted by the interviewer, and I said, this is ridiculous. They're not asking any questions about the issues. They're trying to paint a picture with Jonathan. So I immediately reached out on Twitter and said, hey, are you tired of getting bashed by the by mainstream media? Come on, Bernie 2016 TV, and let's chat. And he got in touch with me right away. So how do we keep spreading the truth and making sure it sticks over our friends over at MSM and other mainstream media outlets?
Well, I'm a big boy, I don't take that seriously about getting attacked by them, and I kind of give back at them. In fact, I have to unfortunately debate that sleazebag David Brock today on CNN at roughly 6:30 Eastern time. For whatever, this is always astounding me that the Clinton campaign puts out the guy who was the right-wing attack dog that slandered Anita Hill and essentially helped pave the way to Clarence Thomas getting on the United States Supreme Court. Now he's a Democratic, attack dog. But I digress. Look, the first thing is what you guys are doing. I mean, with Bernie TV, Bernie 2016 TV is doing exactly what needs to be done and is a fantastic outlet and medium for people to hear the truth. And I do think that there's two pieces of this. One is that we have to keep pressuring the traditional media. And I hear this question a lot. How do we get past the blackout and the control? It's real, and we have to keep pressuring them and standing up to them. But remember, their audiences are declining, and their influence is declining, particularly among younger people who are connected not only to Facebook and Twitter, but Reddit and Snapchat. There's just lots of communication outlets that we should be positively exploiting to get those messages out. And I think Bernie, quite frankly, the campaign has been quite good at that. And if you look at the social media traction that Bernie has, even during Republican debates, there have been at least one or two Republican debates where Bernie was the top trending topic on Twitter, which I always found just astoundingly amazing. So, go ahead.
Yeah. I was our fearless leader, John Ellis of Bernie 2016 TV, always reminds everybody that Bernie owns the internet. So he definitely does have a great game when it comes to interacting and using social media.
And I want people, what I was trying to communicate is sometimes we fall into despair a little bit. I see that among progressives. Oh my God, we're fighting all these big, huge corporations, the media, and some of that's real. But I'm the eternal optimist, I guess, and I always think that, okay, yes, let's remember that, but also let's take the power we have and use that to drive our message. And I think the technology revolution has, I don't want to overstate it, but I think it has really done a lot of good for us in that way.
Yeah, that's cool. Thanks, Jonathan. Hey, there's one cool question that came in here from Denise Silva. She wants to know, Jonathan, can you tell us what Bernie said regarding people with disabilities? She hasn't seen anything mentioned during the debates, but was wondering if you had a perspective on his stance with regarding persons with disabilities.
Well, I can't cite a specific policy he's promoting now, but my sense is that Bernie has always stood up for all people, whether it's people with disabilities, workers, all people who need the support and the backing of government, number one, and policies that make it possible for people to be fully engaged in public life and public society. I can't imagine that there's a single policy that supports people with disabilities that Bernie wasn't behind. If there's a specific, incident, I'd love to know, but I can't imagine that he would not be a strong advocate for people with disabilities.
Yeah, that's a good answer. GHDW says Democratic supporters are being led to believe that voting for Bernie will deconstruct all of what Obama did. How do you convince people this is not the case? I think this is an interesting question because that means that just by the question being asked, the media has already worked. Because I don't sense anything from Bernie's campaign that they are trying to deconstruct everything that Obama did. I think that's a
Well, this is what part of what Bernie called the kitchen sink strategy, which is the Clintons are well known for basically lying as much as they need to win, and they're trying to throw out everything possible. So people have heard recently that Bernie's a single issue candidate, which is probably one of the most laughable things that they've said about him. And one of the things that they're doing is saying Hillary Clinton is wrapping herself around Barack Obama almost in a death grip. I sort of hope it's never physical because this president might not survive how strongly she's trying to tie herself to him. And it's because he's quite popular among Democrats and certainly African Americans. And what Bernie has said, and I think is true, there are many things he supported the president on. Bernie, particularly because the Senate has been very closely divided, Bernie provided very important votes to pass many of the things that Barack Obama has tried to get through, including the Affordable Care Act. Now, Bernie then says, and he often says he likes Barack Obama, he considers him a friend, but Bernie says also we're not a dictatorship. We don't have a king, and there are places where he disagrees with Barack Obama. And I'll give two instances. Bernie has led the fight against the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade agreement. It's one area that I strongly disagree with Barack Obama, and I think he and others, including Hillary Clinton, have supported these terrible trade agreements that have obliterated millions of good-paying jobs and lowered wages. And we can talk more about why that's happened. But Bernie opposes that, and he's been one of the leaders to defeat the TPP. And I think that's a good thing. And thank God that we have a leader that says this isn't a monarchy, and I can disagree strongly with people in my own party because we're trying to define what the party's about. And the second thing is, he said 100, if not 1,000 times, he helped write the Affordable Care Act. He supported the Affordable Care Act because it did, among other things, it covered millions of people. It got rid of the pre-existing condition, which was just a horrendous thing for people. But it also left 29 million people not covered. And people are still paying outrageous premiums and copays. I personally was part of this Affordable Care Act co-op, which collapsed in New York, something called Health Republic. So like millions of other Americans, I had to scramble around. In this case, it was 200,000 people in this co-op to find other coverage. That's not health care. And so Bernie disagrees with the notion that we should stop at the Affordable Care Act. He wants to build on top of the Affordable Care Act and have single-payer Medicare for all.
Yeah. No, that's good. Mr. Holdout wants a little levity brought to this conversation. He feels that we're going that we're not fun enough. So he wants to know if Bernie Sanders enjoys anime, and I think we can extend that to you if you enjoy anime.
I enjoy it all. I don't watch it a lot, but I enjoy it. When I see it, I don't seek it out. I'm just being honest, but it comes across because I do consume social media stuff. Honestly, I'm not sure whether Bernie would consume it, and my guess would be no. I'm just being honest. I don't think that's the first thing he thinks about when he watches, flips on his computer or his TV.
Now, however, I could see Bernie as anime and and having his experiences through becoming the next president. I think that would be a very cool show that people would definitely tune in.
I think that's your next project. There you go.
Think It Through wanted to know if you had seen the video of Bernie's arrest, and is there any way that you could get that released, and so we can make sure it goes viral.
The video when he was arrested back in the 1960s.
Yeah, yeah.
I haven't actually seen the video, truthfully, partly because it came out while I've been traveling, so I haven't looked at it. But it's been out there in social media. I have seen the pictures of him being arrested. I didn't know there was an actual video, but I have seen the still photographs of him both doing sit-ins at the University of Chicago when he was working to desegregate the university housing, and then the more recent picture of him being dragged away by cops, you know, like with handcuffed.
Yeah, yeah.
But I didn't know there was a video.
Well, there's a video, and now I mean that's an interesting thing to just talk about for a second. Get your opinion on that, and that is the whole thing with Jonathan Capehart and the lie that he perpetrated, right? And that article, I don't know, are you familiar with that whole incident with Jonathan Capehart, John Tassini?
No.
So he wrote a hit piece for basically wrote a hit piece saying that the picture taken by whoever it was that took the picture, that they lied, that it's not Bernie Sanders, it's some other guy, Bruce Rappaport, and he wrote this giant hit article on it. Didn't really do the research. Now, he talked this out on whatever channel he's a dude in a bow tie, comes on, is Mr. Conservative black guy, and does his talk for the elite establishment Democratic side. But he did this whole hit piece. That's not Bernie Sanders. Stop pushing out this photo. That's not him, right? The point is lost, right? Because the point really should be that Bernie Sanders was there. You can't deny that Bernie Sanders was involved in the civil rights movement,
Right.
Whether there's a picture over here and that's him or it's somebody else, or a picture over here, the guy was involved. There's all sorts of evidence that he was involved. And now, the internet, the truth tellers, the new muckrakers, we had to go out and unbury the truth. But the damage was done, right? Capehart pushes out the hit piece. Now all of these people are questioning Bernie Sanders. What are they doing here? And he even I think he wrote another article. It's like, I'm sorry, I did my research. I'm a total jerk. But it doesn't matter. Damage is done. This speaks to that. We had that incident. We had the Dolores Huerta incident with the people screaming English only, which was also BS. Well, I want to just really quick. I want to ask a question. How much of an effect do you think the misinformation is going to have on Bernie Sanders' chances of winning? Shit like Dolores Huerta, shit like we've seen what's his name, Joe, I can't think of his name, but he just basically showed a video of what was going on in one of the casinos, and it was an absolute disaster. They were letting people go in and caucus without being registered. How much of an effect is that going to have, do you think?
Well, let's separate the caucus thing, which is an actual practical thing, versus misinformation. Look, it has some effect. I can't tell you I could measure it exactly. And what I said before, it's the kitchen sink effect, which is, the Clintons are well known for being ugly. And let's remember what happened in 2008 when they used the same tactics against then Senator Barack Obama. They have no morals about this because this is about keeping power, controlling power. The lobbyists and all the circle around them want to keep their hold on power. So they will use anything. And so I wouldn't put, nothing has risen on this disinformation to the level of the 47% video that came out against Romney, for example.
You don't think? You don't think?
I don't think any of that has had that, because I think the 47% video actually helped define, not on its own, but was a significant thing of defining who he was. But I don't think that the thing about beyond a certain segment of people that are paying attention, that most of them have paid attention to this question about did Bernie march in the civil rights movement or not. But, most voters, just let's acknowledge, most people don't want to pay attention to the election until they absolutely have to. And they look maybe that's a few days before the election. So I'm not really sure that those things on their own have had much of an effect. That's
Maybe
my.
not. I understand. I understand your take, and maybe not. And I guess when I see something like that happen on mainstream media, and I think right now the black vote seems to be the critical one. That seems to be the
Yeah.
disproportionate problem. We see the young for Bernie. We see liberal white folks for Bernie. We see women now swing for Bernie, and we see Latinos. We know that the Latino vote is stronger, no matter what Hillary does with tactics. But it seems like the African American vote has this blinders on or something. I don't, or
No,
they're just
no,
not aware of Bernie. What,
no.
you know.
I think again, what I said before is that the African American vote is not monolithic, and so I would
Right.
distinguish between older African American voters and younger African American voters. For example, for younger African American voters, John Lewis is essentially irrelevant. For older African Americans, he's an icon. And
Right.
so you have to kind of pull those strands apart. And it comes down, the thing that we can't do anything about, in my view, is the calendar. And I ultimately think that whatever happens in South Carolina and the states in Super Tuesday, March 1st, is really about time. We have to remember, and this is just a fact, Hillary Clinton has probably 99% name recognition.
Right.
And they have been running for the White House since 2000 when they left the White House, the Clintons have. Bernie started running 7, 8 months ago. So there is a factor of celebrity, being well known. Those are things that are hard to break through. And I think that's ultimately the hardest task we have is we just don't know have enough days on the calendar.
Yeah, I
Good.
agree with. There's. It's actually after the 15th. There's another bunch of states, and I think by the 15th, there's just a huge amount of delegates are going to be already chosen.
Yes,
So we're
in the
going
next
into a
four
period where
in the next 4 weeks, something like between 50 and 55% of the delegates will have been chosen already. Florida comes March 15th, which is somewhere around 125, 200 delegates. I can't remember the number. That's a big state on March 15th.
Well, that goes right into one of the questions that just came up there that said, ask the gentleman. They didn't say Mr. Tassini, but I'm just going to say
Wait
ask
a minute. Who are they?
Jonathan.
Which gentleman are they referring to? I don't fall into
Good.
that category.
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a great question. What do you think of the super delegates? Are they a threat? What is this with what is your take on the whole delegate thing?
Well, I wrote a piece in the New York Daily News. It was in last Tuesday. You can check it out. And basically, I said, well, let's step back and understand what the super delegates are. And it's actually that's not the official name. They're called unpledged delegate something. I can't remember now the exact name. But let's use super delegates. They're 15% of the total. And they fall roughly into two categories. One is that they are all the elected Democratic members of Congress in the Senate and the House. And the second category is lower level elected officials and party functionaries. So county executives, mayors, somebody who was, might have been the past national chair of the DNC is probably a super delegate. And they are not bound by any vote. They're not elected by the people. They certainly did not run on the question of who are they going to support for president. They simply have that power to vote because they're part of the party. They've been elected in some other office. And my point in the piece that I wrote was that if Hillary Clinton comes to the Democratic convention in Philadelphia in July and has a lead in the delegates, I think most people who I've met, and I think most Democrats, will vote for her in the general election if she's the nominee, because the prospect of having a President Trump or Rubio or Cruz is just too frightening. But if Bernie comes to the convention with a small lead in the delegates, and the superdelegates then essentially overturn the will of the people and cast their votes with Hillary Clinton, then I think the Democratic Party will be destroyed for a generation. That tens of thousands, if not millions of people, particularly young people who've gotten to the process for the first time, will just walk away. They just won't show up on election day, and Hillary Clinton will lose that election. She may lose it anyway, but she would certainly lose it if it's an inside job, if I can use that terminology. Now, the superdelegates, one of whom I debated about this, whose name I won't out right now, has been a superdelegate for a long time, and she said, "Oh, that's not going to happen." Blah blah blah. If Bernie's leading, then the superdelegates will fall in line, and she said that's what's happened in the past. But my point is that this is a very, very different election in the Democratic Party. It's very different to say there was a competition between Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, because Barack Obama, frankly, was not about a political revolution. He was relatively moderate, in my view. And if you go back in history, all the competition was between people who were within the establishment or within generally a certain box within the party. This is very different because our political revolution is really about changing the party, changing the economic system, kicking out all those lobbyists and all those people who suck on the money and the power that they have inside Washington, no matter which party is in control. And I think that those superdelegates are very likely in this election season to be perfectly willing to overturn the will of the people and to this is assuming Bernie arrives with the lead in delegates at the convention.
I would agree if it's close
Yes.
that they would probably stick to it. But if Bernie starts really cleaning the table, I don't think that they would.
This is the problem on a practical level. It's not a problem. It's a fact. Is that it's unlikely to be anything but a close nomination fight, whoever comes out ahead, because of the way the delegates are allocated. It's very hard for anybody to win a state and get this disproportionate number of delegates. Our system, the Democratic Party, unlike the Republicans who have some winner take all, they're awarded proportionately to the vote you get, and they're awarded by congressional districts. So in a congressional district that you win, let's say there are 6 delegates at stake, you're usually only going to get like a 4-2 split. You're not going to get 5-1, unless you literally have to win a state, and I don't think that's going to happen. It's going to be very rare for anybody to do, either of them to do this. You really literally have to win by 70% of the vote to get an outsized number of delegates. So my view is that whoever wins the nomination and comes to the convention will have a relatively small lead. And when I say relatively small, I mean 100 delegates out of the 4,200 that are at stake.
So we need to pack our bags and get ready for Philly, is what I hear.
Well, I would say that, well, yes, there will be a lot to do at the convention, and it could be around this issue. There'll be an issue of fighting over the platform and the future of the party.
Yep.
For me, I'm involved in this campaign, and maybe this is a good way of kind of coming to an end. Is I'm involved in this because of the notion of the political revolution. I do love Bernie Sanders, and I'm every time I hear him, I love listening to him. But to me, this is about how we're expanding the campaign to change America way past this election, and how we're doing it for the next 10, 20 years. It's a follow-on to Occupy Wall Street. It's a follow-on to other campaigns, to the campaign that won marriage equality. All these campaigns are a piece of it. And so what's exciting to me and what we have to think about at Philadelphia and after is how do we continue to build this revolution, whether Bernie's the nominee or not.
Yeah, that's a good point, and John has definitely alluded to that fact with Bernie 2016 TV is that this is the global engagement network as well. This is kind of the future of where news and where broadcasting and we're really connecting dialogue and bringing communities together. So, Jonathan, thank you so much for being here. There's one more question I think that we'll get in here and as kind of a teaser, and I really appreciate you spending as much time with us as you did.
It's been my honor and privilege, as I said.
Well, wait, I want to just say that I would love to have you back. You are welcome back anytime you want. You can just hit us up and say, I got something to say,
Yeah.
Okay.
and we'll bring you on. So.
Or if you guys need me, you know where to find me. I'm happy to come back anytime. It really is a privilege because you guys are doing just awesome work. Awesome
Oh,
work.
thank you so much. That means everything. Thank you. All right, continue, John Spalding.
Yeah, so I would say one last question. Not for sale Bernie 2016 wants to know, how do you think Bernie's going to do on Super Tuesday, Jonathan?
I think he's going to do very well. Obviously Vermont, Massachusetts, Colorado, which he now is leading in Colorado. I think that's a caucus state, but I could be wrong. And so I think he's going to do very well in those states, and even in the states that he won't win. Sort of to my point before, in places like Georgia and Alabama, which are seen, and Texas, he's still going to get a good chunk of delegates. So it isn't a zero-sum game. It's not like you win 200 and you get zero. He's still going to amass a bunch of delegates, and then you have to piece together the states after that. So I think he's going to get a healthy share. He's going to win some states, and I think he's going to surprise in some states as well.
A beautiful, beautiful statement, and I just want to follow up on that. That you're saying a lot of what Nate Silver had to say. He said Sanders should do very well on Super Tuesday because you're looking at a lot of white liberal states,
Yep.
and he does very well in white liberal states. And so everybody is starting to recognize that in a real election, in a real contest like this, it's not a coronation anymore. This is not a coronation anymore. They said it was going to be, but it is not. We have a battle, right? That is what is going on.
I hold up the book in case people are interested in getting it.
Yes.
Did you put that link up?
We've been putting the link up, and I've got it right here on this
there it
screen
is.
graphic.
I don't even have to do the hard work.
No, we've been blasting this all the whole time. So yes,
Okay,
absolutely.
Well, it's an organizing handbook, and that's why I've did it, was to get it so that we could spread Bernie's words. It's 95% his words, not me, and
That's
it really is a great tool to help people argue for the case when they're trying to persuade neighbors, spouses, friends. So anyway, enjoy it, and if you see me somewhere and you've got the book, I'm happy to sign it.
Awesome. Wonderful. When are you going to be to Portland? That's where I am. When are you getting up to Portlandia?
I may be there sooner than you think.
Awesome. We'd love to just bring you into my office, I guess. Have you in live. Thank you so much for being with us, Jonathan Tassini.
All right, thanks, and thanks to you guys too, asking the questions.
Absolutely.
Take care.
See you now.
Bye-bye.
All right, that was John Spalding, John Tassini. We had Scott in there. That was a fantastic, absolutely brilliant discussion. It's so much better, and I see Celeste over here just cheering, and she's watching, listening from her car, folks. I told her she couldn't talk live because I don't know what's going on with her phone microphone, but it sounds like it's just ridiculous.
John,
Celeste,
that was so funny. So here's the deal, guys. So we get to see Celeste, you guys don't, but she is in her car, and so she can't be on mic because it's kind of loud. She doesn't want to tell anyone that. She was having her thumbs up when John was speaking. When we were talking about the Wall Street folks, she's doing the money grab. She was rocking it. And so for those of you out there, we love Celeste, and so I had a great time watching you, and so I hope that you all know that she loved that interview just as much. Yeah, so it was cool.
Absolutely, it was fantastic. See, folks, when the team works together, when we got all this happening, I totally forgot this was even going to happen. John Spalding has been bugging me about this for weeks. I forgot. And this morning, Janine's like, "You got an interview today?" Like, wonderful. Got the team back. I got some rest. And John Spalding, thank you so much for making that happen. You really were the one who made that happen for this volunteer group. So thank you.
No problem, man. Glad to do it. I hope you guys liked it.
We did. I think it was fantastic. And just for everybody else, Scott, thank you for being in here today. I think what I'd like to do with you, Scott, is follow up on your articles. I've got them loaded if you want to talk a little bit about them now. Folks out there, we had more than 150, 160 plus with us today. Thank you so much for being here. We just had Jonathan Tassini on, author of the book, The Essential Bernie Sanders and His Vision for America. And you can get that at Amazon. You can get that on his website, which was what we were showing here. We kept running this lower third. Go to his website because workinglife.org, he gives you many options to get the book from. And those of you who have issues with Amazon, there's another way to get it, and there's other things. And I like what he had to say, though. It's mostly Bernie's words. And I think at this point, with all of the rallies that we've done, We almost all of us know Bernie's words. We can probably recite Bernie's words over and over again, but it's nice to have a handbook where you can go out and when you're testifying for Bernie, which is the most essential thing we have to do. The most essential thing we have to do right now, folks, is boots on the ground or phones. Right? That's what I want to do a phone bank telethon. I want to try to reach South Carolina. This is, as Jonathan said, what we're doing is what's absolutely necessary. Pushing the message out, trying to get the misinformed to hear the reality, hear the truth. Jonathan Tassini with us, and we're always looking to interview anybody that's involved in the direct on the front lines of this. Anybody that is looking for airtime, is a supporter of Bernie Sanders. If you're a politician, we have a show called We the People, and we would love to have you on here. The newsroom, that was our first, I think our first guest for the newsroom. Honestly, I think it was. But cool, it worked out. It was awesome. Thank you very much for all of that. Let's see. I was gonna run a video. We're looking at 10:12 here, and I'm not sure what we have going on in the afternoon. Janine, anybody? Do we actually have an event happening this afternoon? I was disconnected yesterday.
There is an event happening. Bernie is at the UMass Amherst location, and Biff Ward is going to try to get out there for us and
that's wonderful,
and bring that to us, but we're not 100% sure. It depends on if he's able to get out there or not.
Okay, thank you so much, everybody. That's Janine, and Janine has been on the verge of death for the last week, and we are so glad to have her still with us today. And just send your kind thoughts to Janine, because she is still recovering from evil sickness. There's been a lot of that going around. I've been under the weather the last few days as well, so we're so glad to have Janine back with us and putting order to the chaos that has been the Bernie 2016 TV back room. Her and Celeste and John Spalding, and it's been wonderful. I said yesterday, the day before, the last couple of days actually, I've said that things have been very much a mess and very crazy because of what we had to do to keep things moving. And when Janine was called to do things boots on the ground for Bernie, she went and did that. And when Celeste was called to do what she needed to do, she went and did that. This is the way it works here, folks. The most important thing is Bernie. This channel is secondary. Bernie, boots on the ground in your state, on the phones, working to get more people converted. Phone conversations, personal testimony is still the best way to convert anybody. Sending them here to watch Bernie 2016 TV, that's the second way. that's my opinion anyway. I want to. Well, Scott, do you want to go over your stuff today, or do you want to do it tomorrow with a fresh show? Because today I had all of your things loaded up. I forgot about Jonathan, and we could do it all tomorrow if you want. It's up to you.
Tomorrow will be hard. I'll be on the plane, but.
Oh, we won't do it tomorrow. All right, let's talk. Let's rip into your article after I say more than 150 of you with us. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining the show, and thank you for donating. There's money showing up in the fan fund donating thing. I haven't figured out quite yet how I get it out of the Google account and to pay bills, but I will figure it out. But it's showing up there. None of it goes to YouTube. You guys are donating that. Our average donation amount is about the same as Bernie Sanders, which makes me really, really honored. And I just so for everybody's edification, I cannot see who donates. All I see is a number of people that have donated and the average donation amount. And you guys are covering the electric bill and the internet bill, and thank you very much. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Scott, tell us about this badass article you wrote. What's going on?
Well, but I wanted to avoid the whole Dolores Huerta thing. I thought I was the only media there. I think I still was. I think the other person was just putting it up from their cell phone. And
possibly.
There was a documentary film crew too. But to be honest, I think they should have. I'm not sure that objecting to the translation was a great thing to do. So that's why I would have just avoided the video completely.
So if I'm right, because you and I both heard the same thing, man. And what the real deal was that they had a translator. The translator was for Hillary, was on the Hillary Clinton side of the fence. There was argument over the fact that it was not an unbiased translator.
Right.
And so the host made the statement English only, and they moved forward with that pretty much because everybody was tired, right? Isn't that what was going on there?
Can I just add something?
Pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think the major issue that people had was that it's not that she was a pro-Hillary person. She was a surrogate. She's also received money from Hillary Clinton. So I think that's, it just didn't look right. And it
No, it
really
doesn't.
is, the problem really is that there should have been a neutral translator there anyway.
Yes.
And it should never have happened, and it should have never have gone down like that.
Agreed, and I said that yesterday.
I agree. With my concern was that she's an icon in the labor movement, and I think it's wasn't. I kind of agree with what the moderator said. Is that there was enough. I agree that half the room spoke Spanish, so she wasn't going to get away with anything. But the problem was she claimed afterwards to the media that the Bernie supporters chanted English only, and that clearly didn't happen.
Right.
And that's why I went ahead and put the video up and wrote the story just to set the record straight. I was hoping that it would just blow over and there would be nothing, but she went to the media, and like you talked about Jonathan Capehart, let me get their names. This Janelle Ross and Abby Phillip at the Washington Post also just took her at her word, kind of, in their first version of the article.
Right. Right. It's I get your hesitation at nobody's well. Here's the thing, like she's a Hillary surrogate. There's too many things here that are they're like, no offense, Dolores Huerta, you're a great activist in the labor union, but you just lost some integrity points. Okay, you're a surrogate for Hillary, and you lied. You lied. Okay, maybe it was your perception that Bernie supporters were chanting English only, but everybody, including Scott, who was there documenting the video, and everybody who's heard the video says you're a liar. And somebody should call you a liar, and the press should have the integrity to say you're lying, not to perpetuate your lie. And that's the difference with Jonathan Capehart. He lied, and then the press perpetuated that lie. And then activists, what's her name, America Ferrera, she perpetuated the lie. And the minute it went ablaze on social media, and this is why I got involved last night, folks. I saw people asking for the video. I saw this explode. It was late. I was tired. I saw it explode. I'm like, I know Scott's got the original. And I went back and looked at it, and I was like, I know Scott's got the whole thing here crystal clear. And I found the time mark, and I sent it off, and that's how it got to Susan Sarandon, who started pushing out the truth. We shouldn't have to fight this. That's what bothers me about it, Scott. Is I understand not wanting to go against it. What?
It was good at that point. I was just I felt uncomfortable when it was happening. I was thinking, oh man, this isn't a good thing to object to such an icon doing the
right.
So I wasn't going to do anything with it. But
it makes a lot of sense.
Once she made the false allegations, I'm not gutsy enough to call it a lie yet, but she
it's certainly her understanding of what happened is not the truth. And if she were going to act as an upstanding citizen, if she were going to show integrity, she should come out and say, you know what, I apologize. This is what I thought was going on. Apparently it wasn't, because I've watched the video and I've heard the truth. Just like everybody else.
There is
but she's not.
On one site where to me it sounds like whoever's filming it is saying Bernie supports English only, Bernie supports English only. Now that could have been edited in afterwards too.
Sure.
But the person's definitely not shouting, and from the view of the camera, she's on the Hillary Clinton side. So to me, I think it's just someone filming and just speaking so that it goes into her camera, her phone. Bernie is English only. That's the only place I've heard anybody other than the moderator say the words English only.
Right, right. It's the problem is, just like the Jonathan Capehart deal, it's already out. Damage done. One negative takes 10 positives to undo. So even if somebody questions, so now questioning the validity of the initial information, you're already behind. You're already behind because it got pushed out on mainstream media, and so everybody that's plugged into mainstream media goes, "Gotta be the truth."
And
That's
now that Washington Post article, they did a follow-up article where they're kind of backtrack a little bit, but in the end, just showing the bias of this reporter, they seized in on the fact that when the moderator said we're going to go with English only, there was applause. So they weren't applauding English only concept. They were applauding that there wasn't going to be a Clinton supporter doing the interpreting, but that's how they closed the article, saying that shows that Bernie supporters supported English only
that's
because they
ridiculous.
applauded.
If it were the other way around, and we actually have video of a bunch of Clinton supporters booing a Sanders supporter inside of a caucus. I had that video that I was going to run today. Basically, a bunch of people, and now we do not have video from inside the room, but they kicked out these guys who had traveled from California to speak on behalf in the Nevada caucus, which they are legally able to do. They don't vote, but they're allowed to come into the room and speak on behalf of Bernie. The guy starts speaking, and they cut him off. Like, we don't want to hear this shit. And so they have a vote and say Bernie only, or Nevada folks only, and they all raise their hand and they say get out. And they kick this guy out because he's not from Nevada, although he has every legal right to be in there and speak on behalf of Bernie. And then, according to the individuals that stayed in the meeting, the host, the caucus captain, said the reason you don't want to vote for Bernie, folks, is because he's a socialist Jew. Right? That's hearsay, but that's what they claim in the video. But you can very easily see at the beginning of the video that they're basically saying, "You get out, and they're booing him. I gotta say, there's a lot of video out there, folks, and this is where I'm going with this, Scott. There's a lot of video out there showing just how there's just a lack of integrity with the Hillary campaign. I'm sorry. There's a lack of integrity with your people. We've caught you red-handed doing shit that is against the law, doing sleazy shit. And it doesn't speak well for you or your candidate. Something just came through here, Scott, that I wasn't aware of. And again, I'm going to speak to the truth here. The truth is that Dolores Huerta marched against Monsanto, and now she's taking a paycheck from Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton is one of the biggest goddamn supporters of Monsanto in establishment. I don't know how you can be a Hillary fan. How you can still have integrity as a human, go march against Monsanto and support a candidate that has fed that company millions. I don't understand.
Well,
I don't know if you were
Scott was there
when
for the
Susan
conversation, right?
I'm sorry, what? So
What's
was that
that?
again?
I was just going to say, Scott, I think, is going to talk about, he was there for a conversation between Susan Sarandon and that woman, and talking about that very thing.
Really? Scott?
Yeah, Susan Sarandon was pointing out, I know you don't support GMOs, and how can you support a candidate that supports Monsanto and spoke for Monsanto, has taken money from Monsanto?
Wow.
And
Wow. I didn't realize she was there. I couldn't really tell who all was there and who wasn't. Who were the activists that were there? Who were the supporting? Who were the celebrities supporting sides there? There's Gabby Hoffman, right?
yeah, Gabby Hoffman and Susan Sarandon.
Right.
I didn't recognize Gabby Hoffman. I didn't know that she was there
Oh,
until
I recognize her because I watched Transparent. I was like, hey. But
and Dolores Huerta is the only one that I know, and I don't think America Ferrera was there. I think she just picked it up on Twitter.
Yeah, and that was the other thing. So America Ferrera, all you did was perpetuate a lie. No integrity there. You just picked it up when, oh, this is what she said, and it was your blast on Twitter that carried this into viral. All right. And that's
Yeah.
literally, Scott, I was like watching this unfold when I talked to everybody about how this is a war, and this is a war for truth, and that we're using Twitter to carpet bomb the web with truth or push strategic messages. I was like, oh no, you don't. We'll be grabbing the truth from Scott's video right here. We'll be time marking it. We will be pushing this out. Oh no, you don't. But this is the battle we fight every day. We fight this Jonathan Capeharts, America Ferreras. We fight misinformation that is still reaching the 24% of America that still believes this shit coming out of establishment media.
And this is the
Yeah, I
second
was
time
gonna
it's
run
happened.
So what's that, Janine?
I was going to say this is the second time this has happened recently with Killer Mike, how his comments were being turned against him because he happened to quote a feminist, right? And then he shared out a portion
Yes.
of our video.
Very true. That we talked about that. That's very true. It was another. He was quoting a feminist. You're absolutely right. And it was remember the uterus incident, and that was how CNN first headlined it. Killer Mike explains or defends. That was how Killer Mike defends uterus statement. There's no defense needed when you were quoting. You were quoting a woman. You're quoting a feminist, and this is the misinformation. Scott, what were you going to say?
Well, I'll have the Sarandon Huerta discussion at some point. I tried editing it last night, and it got where the computer crashed while it was uploading into YouTube, and now YouTube thinks it's there, but it's not there,
Oh,
and I can't get it.
that.
Not YouTube, but
Yeah, I know.
iMovie thinks it's there, and it's not there, and I can't get.
So you
I
have that
can't
whole
get it.
conversation. You have the whole conversation between Susan Sarandon and Dolores Huerta.
Yeah, it was before the caucus started out in the hall.
Wow, that's fantastic. Imagine that, folks. Thank goodness that Scott was there. Was there any? You said there was no establishment media around capturing this, right? Just phones?
There was First Look Media was doing a documentary, and that was the only other camera I saw.
Wow, wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. Lots of comments today, folks. Scott, is there anything else we're at 10:28. Is there anything else you want to talk about, wrap about your article? Guys, I will drop the rundown into the newsroom. I promise you I will drop the rundown in the newsroom as soon as we're done with the show. I promise. But Scott, anything else you want to talk about on that?
I think
No?
we covered everything. I think we covered everything.
Okay, great. Thank you, guys.
There's one thing that I think we can mention that Jesse just happened to mention, and it looks like it's validated by Democratic Underground. The Democratic Progressive Caucus of Florida endorses Sanders, and by a
Really?
majority of members. So we'll see what happens in Florida. But I think that's an
Wow.
awesome endorsement.
Isn't Florida generally considered a key swing state?
Are there
or something?
progressives?
Yeah. I mean, what was it? One of the last elections, Tim Russ said Florida. But I think Florida is going to be an interesting place to see which way it goes.
I agree. That's I mean, the only time I ever talk about Florida is when I've watched At Midnight. I'm like, geez, what's going on there? But if you guys are really liberal and you're radical, then you'll be voting for Bernie. So good.
And the only
Anybody
other
but
thing-
Alan progressive in Florida?
Is that where he's from? Janine?
Just kidding.
Yeah, I don't know. The only other thing I wanted to mention is Bernie will be doing a press conference, I think, in about an hour and a half or so, maybe 2 hours. Sorry, but yeah, probably about 2 hours. And he's supposed to get a major grassroots endorsement today. I don't know if it's the same one, but we'll have to keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, and we don't know if we have a feed, right? We're not sure.
Yeah, we don't know about that, but we'll work on that, and we'll work on the UMass Amherst.
That would be fantastic, just to get that. Guys, we'll try to bring that live to you, and as soon as I know, I'll put up an event. I don't want to put up an event anymore without really confirming that we have a feed, because I know that really gets a lot of people excited and then pissed off when the comment thread disappears. So we won't do that anymore. Yesterday for me was really difficult personally, and with a lot of things going on, and I was really tired, and I was really bummed about everything going on in BTV and stuff. And in one day, everything turned around. One day, everything went from shit to rainbows because good people came in and got to work, and because you guys said a lot of nice things. And so I just want to say thank you to everybody for boosting my spirits and helping me stay Bernie strong and helping me keep this going, because I needed you guys. And that's everybody in the volunteer group, everybody sitting in their cars, everybody sitting in hotel rooms, everybody, wherever they are. We're all in this together, and it's going to take all of us and all of our strength and all of our effort to stay on top and to not let things get us down and to not let the enormity of the D-Day we have in front of us. D-Day is the beginning, and we've got to move from there into transforming our entire world into something we all want to live in and a planet that can survive. Jonathan Tassini said it, that 1 minute clip that I played at the beginning. We have a planet that's dying, and we need to work together to fix that above all things. You guys are fantastic. Thank you for being here today, and we will see you later today, hopefully with a feed from one of these two places, maybe both if we're lucky. If not, I'll see you tomorrow with the newsroom at 9 a.m., noon Eastern, and we will be doing our best to bring this show up, elevate it with you to improve the conversation and reach as many people as we can. That's the biggest thing you can do to help us folks from this conversation together, is to take this video, share it out, make clips, do time marks, let people know where important conversations have happened, use it to testify for Bernie. That's what this media is for, and that's why we do what we do. So thank you all for joining us. We're going to go out with, of course, my favorite tune of the election right now, which is Killer Mike's Reagan. And I was looking at this cover, guys, that I just want to push this cover really quick, that Jesse made. And the old cover still works. This is the old cover, for those of you who remember. Went a long train of abuses and usurpations. It's difficult to read, though. They got a bunch of big old language in there. But when you go here, I like this one better now, because I want everybody to know, everybody out there who's not quite yet woken up to the fact that mainstream media is full of shit. I want them to also to realize that mainstream media has perpetuated this myth of the establishment, the democratic establishment, being good and being in our favor. But Ronald Reagan was an actor, not at all a factor. He was just an employee of the country's real masters, like the Bushes, Clinton, and Obama, just another talking head telling lies on teleprompters. That is what we have today. We have Hillary Clinton telling lies on teleprompters, and we need to beat her so that we can fix our nation. Feel the burn, everybody. Thank you for being here.
Our government has a firm policy not to capitulate to terrorist demands, that no concessions policy remains in force. In spite of the wildly speculative and false stories about arms for hostages and alleged ransom payments, we did not, repeat, did not trade weapons or anything else for hostages. Nor will we.
The ballad of the bullet, some freedom or some bullshit. Will we ever do it big or just keep settling for little shit? We brag on having bread, but none of us are bakers. We all talk having greens, but none of us own acres. If none of us own acres and none of us grow wheat, then who will feed our people when our people need to eat? So it seems our people starve from lack of understanding, cause all we seem to give them is some ballin' and some dancing and some talking about our car and imaginary mansions. We should be indicted for bullshit we inciting. Telling children deaf and pretend that it's exciting. We are advertisements for agony and pain. We exploit the youth, we tell them to join the gang. We tell them dope stories, introduce them to the game. Just like Oliver North introduced us to cocaine in the 80s when them bricks came on military plane.
A few months ago, I told the American people I did not trade arms for hostages. My heart and my best intentions still tell me that's true, but the facts and the evidence tell me it is not.
The end of the Reagan era, I'm like Lemma 12er, old enough to understand the shit had changed forever. They declared the war on drugs, like a war on terror, but what it really did was let the police terrorize whoever. But mostly black boys, but they would call us niggas, and lay us on our belly while they fingers on their triggers. They boots was on our head, they dolls was on our crotches, and they would beat us up if we had diamonds on our watches. And they would take our drugs and monies as they pick our pockets. I guess that's the privilege of policing for some profit. But thanks to Reaganomics, prison turned to profits. Cause free labor's the cornerstone of U.S. economics. Cause slavery was abolished unless you are in prison. You think I ambush it and then read the 13th Amendment. Involuntary servitude and slavery it prohibits. That's why they giving drug offenders time in double digits. Ronald Reagan was an actor, not at all a factor. Just an employee of the country's real masters. Just like the Bushes, Clinton and Obama. Just another talking head telling lies on teleprompters. If you don't believe the theory, then argue with this logic. Why did Reagan and Obama both go after Gaddafi? We invading sovereign soil, going after oil. Taking countries is a hobby paid for by the oil lobby. Same as in Iraq and Afghanistan. And Ahmadinejad say they coming for Iran. They only love the rich and how they load the poor. If I say any more, they might be at my door. Who the fuck is that? Staring in my window, doing that surveillance on Mr. Michael Render. I'm dropping off the grid before they pump the lead. I leave you with 4 words, I'm glad Reagan dead.
Huge